What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and based on some of the signs we're seeing at the moment in terms of D&D 5e, I think we might have a little bit of knowledge about what may be changing in 2024 with the updated expanded rules, and that is potentially the removal of short rests entirely. Now, I say that based on some stuff that we've seen, but that does rely on a much larger implication and changes for some things, and we'll talk about that. So if you guys want to discuss it further in the comments, please feel free to do so, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But your comments may spin up into a whole nother video based on ideas you have for how to reshape some of these things if indeed we do lose short rest altogether. That being said, I wanted to talk to you about the sponsor for today's video, a brand new app that is hoping to get launched over here on Indiegogo, the LFG Looking for Group tabletop app. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell most of you this, that finding a D&D group sometimes can basically seem like a miracle, where stars align and you're able to do so. But if we take a look at the app, this concept here is, and they also bring it up right here in the opening statement, you want to try to find a game online. What app do I use? What forum post do I need to be on? Do I need to be a member of a certain Discord? The purpose of this app is to basically make that whole process as easy as possible for you. So it says, what about if you just moved away or you're visiting a new location for a couple of months? Previously, you needed to scour the internet finding groups who posted 6 months ago, reaching out to them, never hearing back. With our app, you simply answer the questions we present, and we can show you all the available groups to play with. If none are local, then no worries. Online is always available, and we'll show you how to use those as well. So it goes on to say whether you're a veteran DM or a new DM, this would be a great experience, and you can have that kind of information up front. So they're Labrador Studios. They have been working on a tactile RPG, which is available on Steam, Live by the Sword Tactics. I'll put a link to this in the description if you'd like to go and check out the Steam game as well. But they're basically they're working with, again, 12 Oaks software to develop this. So here's basically the mechanics. It's these 5 questions. What game do you want to play? D&D Pathfinder will be the initial provided ones, but there may be more added in the future. What days are you available? Are you new to the game? Are you a veteran? What role do you want to fill? Do you want to play online, in person, or both? After signing up, users are shown a list of groups that match their criteria. At a glance, users can see what group is looking or what they're looking for, be it players or DMs. Users can then select what piques their interest, and you can see it has a very clean, thematic UI here, and you basically can see, hey, here's a couple of different groups, whether they're new friendly or not. These are just, again, mock-up images of what the final thing will look like. And then, yeah, you can learn more about the group by clicking on it. You can obviously fill out as much information as you want. It says avatars are also a thing that you'll be able to develop in here, your name, class, race for your characters, whether you're a player or a DM. And then what kind of perks do you have here? So a simple donation to see the project become a reality. You can try to get beta access. There's a background flare pack to have new backgrounds for your app, an avatar flare pack, and then hero and legendary subscriptions come in different time lengths and avatars available. You can prepay for them now at a discounted rate before the app exits beta and launches fully. So there you go. And you can see the variety of the different tiers here for different month periods. You can see, again, they're a British company, so everything's going to be converted from pounds to dollars. But either way, I thought that this was a really cool app. I'll have a link in the description. People have talked about this concept of like an Air D&D for a long time, an app that just says, hey, I'm going to be in the area, what games are available? And this may be the solution to that. So anyway, thank you to the LFG team for sponsoring this video. Back to my conversation from before regarding short rests. So we've seen a lot of different classes had mechanics that might have been X number of times per short rest, or things of that nature, and they seem to have changed in newer versions, or even certain racial features were X number of times per short rest. And we have seen a transition almost wholesale in the Wizards of the Coast 5e community to go from that to proficiency bonus times per long rest. And if you think about it, proficiency bonus is an established mechanic that you basically need to understand from the start of the game, or the game won't make sense to you. It's a static number that they already have a handle on. It goes from 2 to 6. Pretty easy. And then we can say, hey, that's good because it scales. It's built-in scaling. Now, we've seen these sort of multiple time per long rest mechanics in things like clerics, for example. Clerics, a lot of the player's handbook clerics and even a couple of subsequent ones had wisdom modifier times per long rest abilities, which I always was a fan of because that kind of forced you, or not forced you, but gave you incentive to focus on a specific ability of your class. Again, clerics being primarily wisdom based, that made sense. But I also had liked the concept of using that X number of times per long rest mechanic for other classes as well. When I did my rework of the Arcane Archer for the fighter, I said, oh, their number of arcane shots could be, you know, intelligence modifier times, again, per short rest in this particular instance, but you understand my point. But I think this also is the concept of switching to proficiency bonus times per long rest doesn't, I guess, penalize you for having to have, you know, great multiple stats, right? So if you are a paladin, you have points in strength, and, you know, you only have so much left to put in, say, charisma for your spells or possibly abilities, and this thing was charisma modifier times per long rest. Now, if we make it proficiency bonus times per long rest, that means that we effectively removed that restriction from you. And that seems to be the kind of trajectory that 5e is taking, is simplicity and keeping things tight and clean for the purposes, again, of new players, but also streamlining for veteran and, you know, ongoing players as well. So proficiency bonus times per long rest, I get it. I kind of like it. I think it makes sense. Like I said, it's built-in scaling. It starts at 2, it ends at 6. There are ways to up your proficiency bonus, though few and far between. I think there's just the one Ion Stone, but that also gives that Ion Stone that much more power by increasing that. And I think it's pretty clean overall. The biggest example I can think of off the top of my head was the Blade Singer Wizard they could do Blade Song twice per short rest in its original printing in Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and when it was updated in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it was shifted from 2 times per short rest to proficiency bonus times per long rest. Now, I was playing a Blade Singer at the time when the change was made, so that was an interesting change for me, but I'll be honest with you, more often than not, I didn't ever Blade Song more than twice a day anyway, so now I had, you know, at that point, I think 4 times to do it. Now, I will also say that my party had a Warlock in the party, and that brings my next point up. If we're trying to get rid of short rests potentially as a mechanic, and I think that might have something to do with this concept of the adventuring day, and I made a video on it a while back about how many encounters you were, in theory, supposed to have in an adventuring day. And I think that was based on you taking short rests and whatnot throughout the day to roll hit dice to heal. Well, we saw a little bit in the one Unearthed Arcana for Heroes of Krynn that they were possibly looking to do multiple different uses for hit dice. Because I'd say for 90% of the time, the only thing people use hit dice for is to roll for healing on a short rest. So if we remove short rests, then we need to come up with a different mechanic to utilize hit dice. And seeing these new feats and potential options to allow you to expend a hit die to buff something, that might be part of it. It also brings up the kind of negative to this is you would be losing that potential option of short rest healing, which is something that any character can do that doesn't require them to use potions, magic items, or any spell slots to do so. So I don't know if they're going to go back to like the 4E healing surge where everybody gets like a self-heal. I don't think so. It was pretty poorly received as far as I could tell. But that's something you'd have to consider if you remove short rests as a mechanic. Then you won't have that option for short rest healing. But the larger issue I see is the fighter, and more specifically than the fighter is the Warlock, right? Warlock's whole thing is short rest spell slots, right? You get less spell slots, but you get your spell slots back on a short rest. I remember when I initially read the player's handbook for the very first time, I was like, that's so weird that Warlock gets so few spell slots. I didn't realize when I first read it that they got those spell slots back on a short rest. And that obviously opens up a lot of stuff for multi-classing as well, to be able to get those short rest spell slots to fuel different things. But what could we do if we were to remove the short rest spell slot mechanic? Now, I'll tell you, I don't know if Warlock existed in 2nd edition and prior, but I know Warlocks did exist in 3rd edition. They weren't in the main player's handbook. They came later on. And for them, as something that I have said before, Eldritch Blast was a class feature for them. It wasn't a cantrip, and that's partly due to the way cantrips were handled. And we can make a video on old edition cantrips if you're curious about that. But it was basically a class feature that you had that you would activate that would level up in damage as time went on. And that was, I see they kind of combined that. Instead of making it just a class feature as a thing you could do every turn, they made it a cantrip because that fits more into the mechanics of 5e. But I might say go back to that. I mean, we've talked about this before multiple times on this channel. Yes, you can be a Warlock without Eldritch Blast. We all know that you can do it. Kudos to you for trying to break the mold. There are so many different invocations tied to Eldritch Blast. Now, whether I don't necessarily think that that's right, personally, but we have so many of these different cantrips tied to Eldritch Blast. It's very clear that the devs want you to pick Eldritch Blast. It's one of the best damage dealing cantrips in the game, and it has a lot of things you can do to augment it. Now, I've said this before a bunch as well. If it's not a choice, if it's basically like you have to take this, it shouldn't be a choice, right? Maybe it should be one of the things you get at first level. You learn Eldritch Blast and 2 cantrips of your choice. That removes that option, so you always have it, and it doesn't have to be like I have to purposefully hamper myself by not taking Eldritch Blast to basically say that I'm going to do that. So you could remove that and make Eldritch Blast a class feature. Now, that still doesn't really change the short rest mechanic, but that's something different. We're kind of, if we're going to change the Warlock entirely, we could say, okay, maybe they're more of, maybe we make them more of a half caster, perhaps more along the lines of something like a Paladin. And we say, okay, you have Eldritch Blast as a class feature. It's a thing that levels up with you, like a sneak attack. Actually, that's a better example. Maybe Eldritch Blast is essentially like sneak attack. It gets dice every so many levels, and it levels up. Now, maybe it's a single target as opposed to 4 separate rays, but it gets additional damage, and that's just part of the class table. It just gets more as you level up. Perhaps you can get invocations that would let you target 2 things, and that could be a whole option. Invocations is a pretty unique mechanic. That can be a thing that, again, the Warlocks, we can focus very heavily on what invocations, and maybe we could give them, again, half casting, similar to a... we could also maybe go the Artificer route and go with the spellcasting kind of built around like the Artificer has. We still have the concept of the pact magic, of Pact of the Tome, Pact of the Blade, and all these different tomes or different pact options. That could still be, we could maybe expand that a little bit rather than just one thing that you make at level 3, and then you also have, a couple of invocations tied to that. Plus, you still have your options for the different subclasses. So I think the option would be we just have to change around the way their spellcasting works, give them either more spells and basically make them a full-blown caster similar to a sorcerer or a wizard, and they just get regular old spellcasting. Or we change their spellcasting to be, again, more along the lines of a paladin or an artificer, and we make Eldritch Blast kind of its own unique feature that levels up, again, similar to a sneak attack. And I think with a little bit of workshopping on that, I do think we could get it there to a point where it felt unique enough, different enough from a wizard and a sorceress. And when I say different enough, I'm not talking about roleplay mechanics, because you can obviously roleplay a character any way you want. We need to separate things out mechanically so that there's a reason for it to be there. If the Warlock is just as similar, and you can actually kind of make this argument in some cases for the sorcerer and the wizard, if they're so similar, then why do we have 2 separate classes? Why could we not just combine them? They went for this route to make the sorcerer the only one who has access to meta magic, where that was never the case in the past. So that's kind of their unique mechanic and the sorcery points. So I do think we could maybe make, again, Eldritch Blast a feature, and that makes Warlock sort of different and unique enough that it could hold its own in some form of new spellcasting. Okay, what about fighters? One of the other things that a fighter has, on top of being able to attack more than anybody else, is well, I say all, but they've kind of started to change away from that as well. Originally, it seemed that pretty much everything that a fighter had access to would come back on a short rest, right? Action Surge, Second Wind, Battlemaster fighting maneuvers, things of that nature. Well, I'm going to say that maybe Battlemaster fighting maneuvers and different things like that should either be baked into the weapons or just be a thing that fighters have access to. Fighters have maneuvers. That's a thing that they all have. All fighters have maneuvers. This will help close the, I'll call it the skills gap between the martials and the caster types. And maybe we do something like we make... I don't think we should make Action Surge proficiency bonus times per long rest. We could probably make Second Wind proficiency bonus times per long rest, or Indomitable. One of those could be proficiency bonus times per long rest. But maybe Action Surge, maybe it's on a scaler, right? Like, so you have Action Surge once at, second level, and then you get another one later on. It could, again, we could follow we could follow like the rage mechanic, the rage damage mechanic, which is basically half your proficiency bonus. So whenever your proficiency bonus goes up by 1, the number of action surges it goes up by half. So that's kind of how rage damage ends at like +4 or so. That's it's an okay example, but my thoughts are you don't want to give everybody up to 6 action surges at high levels. That would be insane, especially when we're sporting at least 3 attacks. But maybe, with the power creep in the game in general, maybe that's okay. You could just have, you can't do 1 action surge per long rest because that would just I feel like that would be too weak. So, maybe you do half your proficiency bonus, or you just give it a number in the table that says, at the first 6 levels, you get 1 action surge, then you get 2, and however the case may be. I don't know. Fighter fans out there, you tell me, because I imagine if you were limited to only having it so many times per long rest, it would lose a lot of that. But then it also comes down to how many short rests are you taking in your campaign that's a problem, right? Because if you're not taking a lot of short rests, which I've been in parties where short rests are everything, because we have people that get stuff back on a short rest, or we basically never take any short rests because nobody gets anything back. So I don't know. I think if we maybe we just lose the Battlemaster subclass completely and divvy up the maneuvers to base fighter in some way, or maybe different fighter subclasses get access to different maneuvers. I don't know how it would work. But that could help remove one of these short rest issues. Like I said, I think you can make Second Wind proficiency bonus times per long rest. That'd be pretty cool, and it would actually get a lot more use at higher levels, especially if we're, again, removing short rest healing mechanics. And then the other things that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, right, we'd have Bardic Inspiration coming back on a short rest. That would be a bummer, because that truck to 5th level where you get your Bardic Inspirations back on a short rest, that makes it difficult. But here's another option. We start adding things to the proficiency bonus times per long rest. It would make it more total times in theory, but it would make up for how many short rests you have. So perhaps Bardic Inspiration is you get a number of Bardic Inspiration uses equal to your charisma modifier plus your proficiency bonus. Starts off potentially at 7 if you have a 20 in your charisma at level 1, but it scales all the way up to, assuming 20 being the max, 11 Bardic Inspiration uses at level 17. 11 uses of Bardic Inspiration per long rest? That's not bad. And maybe we change that up and add in different things, and that could maybe be a mechanic we do across the board. Not saying that fits for everything, but maybe for monks, because monk key points come back, right? Key points come back and key points is basically 1 per level of your character. Key points come back on a short rest. Maybe key points, it's, 1 per level plus your wisdom modifier, 1 per level plus your proficiency bonus, essentially. Or maybe we have some sort of mechanic to get some key points back in a way similar. Well, I was going to say similar to what the wizards have for spell slots, but that's a short rest mechanic as well with the arcane recovery. So we'd have to come up with something for that. It could just be, so again, thinking of the wizard's arcane recovery, if you remove the short rest mechanic, it could just be, you know, once per long rest, you can, as an action, I don't know, regain so many spell, you know, half of your wizard level rounded up in spell slots. That could be an option for you. Same thing with like channel divinity. Maybe you get access to more channel divinities. Maybe you add in again proficiency bonus channel divinities. I'm really having, like, I guess as the more I dive into this, the trickier it gets. But then I also think back to, I had heard that at one point, some of the folks that were working at Wizards of the Coast were upset that bonus actions actually made it into the game. They had said that they thought bonus actions were a holdover from a previous edition or from the D&D Next playtest for 5th edition, and that bonus actions shouldn't have made it into the game at all. I would argue, actually, I don't know. I'm going to ask you guys. If you had to see one of these mechanics leave in 5th edition, in this new 5.5 or whatever 2024 is going to bring, what would you want to see leave? Would you want to see bonus actions leave? Or would you want to see short rest? Short rest, as we said, it impacts some classes almost not at all, right? I don't think a barbarian gets anything back on a short rest, for example. I don't think a sorcerer gets anything back on a short rest. Same thing with a ranger. There are certain classes, and rogues, I think, too, right? Certain classes don't benefit from the short rest mechanic at all in any way. So that seems like something, whereas a bonus action is usable by every single class. But the concept would be that instead of having a bonus action, whatever you were trying to do would say you could also do this. Like, you know, on your turn as a barbarian, you can enter a rage and still take a full action or something like that. So instead of using the term bonus action, it would basically be like, you can do this and then also this, right? Like you can cast this spell and then also take your full action. Kind of like that's how you might have to change the spellcasting rules, but that's how I had heard it described from one of the devs that was working, that had brought this up years ago, was that they would have preferred to streamline it and remove the concept of actions and say that, you know, it would just say the whatever the thing that was a bonus action would just have a qualifier that it let you do something else. I think I prefer the bonus action mechanic myself, and I could probably lose short rest in favor of some reworks. And I do feel like Warlock, as probably one of, like I said, one of the biggest examples, has been dying for a true rework for a while, which is something that I've been casually working on in the background that I haven't really put a lot of time into. But let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. What do you think? Do you think I'm crazy off base, or do you think all of the changes we've seen are kind of leaning towards the removal of short rest mechanics? I think a lot of people see that when they see this X number of proficiency bonus times per long rest for this ability, and they're like, oh, they must be trying to phase out short rest. But the more you think about it, there are a lot more things that are tied into short rest. Like I said, the Warlock and the Fighter's whole class are basically heavily focused around the ability to use short rests. So they need a rework. But like I said, I'm also not convinced that that's a bad thing. So anyway, and again, if you think of anything, any other ways that I, or maybe to expand on some of the things that I threw out there, how you can make this work a little bit better, or, maybe there's some other mechanic that you think they'll instill instead that will kind of work its way around short rest in some way. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.